Well, the Ark of the Covenant is fascinating because it's the most important ritual object that Judaism has ever had.
The Ark of the Covenant is closer to being found today than in 25 centuries. It has been hunted beneath Jerusalem, guarded by a monk in Ethiopia, buried in the mountains, and even tracked by CYA psychics.
The Temple Mount in Jerusalem has never been excavated, but an illegal construction project 20 years ago opened the door to some major discoveries.
Now, a new scientific breakthrough may finally test the leading theory without moving a single stone. But before we ask where it is, we must ask something far stranger. What exactly was it?
The Ark is first introduced scripturally in the book of Exodus, where God gives Moses instructions to build an ark for carrying the Ten Commandments.
The first scientific search. It is April 2026, and for the first time in more than 2,500 years, the search for the Ark of the Covenant has become a scientific enterprise. A biblical archaeologist, equipped with a muon detector and a hypothesis, intends to test it without moving a single stone. Dr. Chris McKinney, Associate Professor of Biblical Archaeology at Lipscomb University in Tennessee, believes the answer to one of history's greatest mysteries lies directly beneath the ancient stones of Jerusalem. His leading theory places the Ark somewhere under the city of David, the archaeological site immediately south of the Temple Mount. The Ark has been missing since approximately 587 BCE, when the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the first temple. McKinney believes it was deliberately concealed, and he intends to test his theory using a muon detector. Muons are subatomic particles created when cosmic rays from deep space strike Earth's atmosphere. By placing muon detectors underground and measuring the flux of particles that pass through, scientists can identify cavities and voids. Early scans of the city of David have already revealed previously unknown subterranean openings. McKinney has anchored his search in three ancient traditions. The first, the Mount legend, holds that priests hid the Ark in underground chambers beneath the Temple Mount. The second, the Rock legend, describes the prophet Jeremiah hiding the Ark at a rocky location between two mountains near Jerusalem. The third, drawn from the book of 2 Maccabees, places Jeremiah carrying the Ark to a cave on Mount Nebo. McKinney explored these theories in a documentary, Legends of the Lost Arks, released on April 7, 2026. Legends of the Lost Ark is a film that is documentary in nature, McKinney said. It's specifically investigative in that it is exploring the question of what happened to the Lost Ark, but specifically through the lens of what did the earliest sources that we have say happened to it. McKinney does not claim to have discovered the Ark for now, but he is excited and hopeful about what will come from new technologies that enable researchers to peer into the Earth without disturbing holy sites. For the first time in history, the search has moved beyond legend and into the realm of verifiable science. But before we can search for the Ark, we need to understand why people feared it in the first place. What the Ark was. To understand why the Ark of the Covenant has captivated the human imagination for more than 2.5 millennia, one must first understand what the object actually was. The biblical description is precise and remarkably detailed. The instructions for building the Ark appear in the book of Exodus, chapter 25, verses 10 through 22. According to the text, God himself delivered these specifications to Moses on Mount Sinai. The Ark was to be constructed from acacia wood. Its dimensions were exact, 2.5 cubits in length, 1.5 cubits in width, and 1.5 cubits in height. Using the standard ancient cubit of approximately 18 inches, this translates to roughly 3 3/4 feet long, 2 1/4 feet wide, and 2 1/4 feet high. It was to be overlaid with pure gold, both inside and out. A gold molding was wrapped around its perimeter. 4 gold rings were fitted at each corner, and poles of acacia wood, also overlaid with gold, were inserted into these rings. Critically, the poles were never to be removed, ensuring the Ark could be carried without any direct human contact. The most distinctive feature was its lid, known as the mercy seat or atonement cover. This lid was made of solid, pure gold. Upon this mercy seat, the craftsman fashioned 2 cherubim, also of hammered gold, positioned at opposite ends. They faced each other, their wings spread upward, overshadowing the mercy seat. This space between the wings, above the golden lid, and between the two angelic figures was understood to be the very throne of God. Inside the ark, according to the biblical record, were three objects of profound significance. The first was the testimony, the 2 stone tablets inscribed with the 10 commandments. The second was a golden jar containing a portion of the manna, the miraculous bread that sustained the Israelites during their 40 years in the wilderness. The third was Aaron's rod, which had miraculously budded and blossomed with almonds as a sign of divine approval. Throughout the biblical narrative, the ark is depicted as an active and terrifying force. In the second book of Samuel, chapter 6, King David transported the ark to Jerusalem. The ark was placed on a cart, and as the oxen stumbled, a man named Uzzah reached out his hand to steady it. The text records that the anger of the Lord burned against Uzzah, and God struck him down on the spot for his irreverence, and he died there beside the ark of God. The ark was also understood as a weapon of war. In the book of Joshua, the conquest of Jericho is achieved through the presence of the ark. Joshua chapter 6 describes how the priests carried the ark around the walls for 6 days. On the 7th day, they marched around the city 7 times. The priests blew their trumpets, the people shouted, and the walls collapsed. This brings us to a theory that emerged in January 2026. David Falk, an Egyptologist with a PhD from the University of Liverpool, proposed a radical interpretation of the ark's design. Falk argued that the ark was intentionally modeled on Egyptian ritual furniture. In ancient Egypt, sacred chests were decorated with uraeus cobras and winged goddesses like Nekhbet, symbols that created sacred space. Falk suggests that the Israelites, who had spent generations in Egypt, borrowed and reworked these designs. The ark resembled an Egyptian shrine, but with one difference. Egyptian shrines housed an idol, whereas the ark contained none. Its sacred space was above it, between the wings of the cherubim. Falk argues the ark was a deliberate theological rebuke to Egyptian religion, a statement that the God of Israel did not require a physical statue. As he wrote in Biblical Archaeology Review, the ark was constructed using a visual language that everyone knew 3,300 years ago, but is mostly lost to us today. Whether one accepts Falk's theory or not, it forces a reconsideration of the ark as more than merely a box, more of a throne for an invisible god, and a theological weapon aimed at the religious assumptions of the ancient world. And then, the ark disappears from the biblical record before the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem. Ever since, the world has been searching for it. But of all the searches for the Ark of the Covenant, none is stranger than the one conducted by the Central Intelligence Agency. The government investigation. In the 1980s, as part of a secret Cold War program known as Project Sunstreak, the CIA and Defense Intelligence Agency employed remote viewers, people who claimed they could project their consciousness across vast distances. Remote viewing was defined as a psychic technique in which a viewer transcends time and space to perceive targets. The program emerged from Cold War fears that the Soviet Union was investing heavily in psychic research. The documents were declassified in August 2000 and resurfaced in 2025 and 2026. According to the record, on December 5, 1988, a remote viewer identified only as Remote Viewer number 32 participated in a 90-minute session. They were given coordinates and asked to describe what they perceived. The CIA document states that the viewer attained excellent sight contact and kept analytic overlay to a minimum. The session summary identifies the target as a container with another container inside. The object was fashioned of wood, gold, and silver. The viewer described it as coffin-shaped and decorated with seraphim, the 6-winged angelic beings from the book of Isaiah. The document even includes sketches showing winged figures on the corners of the object and what appear to be mummies lined up along a wall. The viewer placed the location somewhere in the Middle East. Individuals nearby appeared to be speaking Arabic, and surrounding structures suggested the presence of mosque domes. The object itself was said to be hidden underground in a dark, damp location. The most chilling claims concerned its protection. According to the viewer, the target was guarded by mysterious entities and could only be opened by those authorized to do so. Anyone attempting to force it open would be destroyed by a power unknown to us. The viewer also claimed that when the proper time arrived, the locking mechanism would prove surprisingly simple. The object's purpose, they said, was tied to ceremony, memory, spirituality, resurrection, and knowledge far beyond what humanity currently understands. The documents do not claim the Ark was found. They simply record what one participant in a government-sponsored psychic experiment claimed to perceive. Project Sunstreak was one of several remote viewing programs operated by the United States government during the Cold War. Over more than 2 decades, researchers collected thousands of pages of session reports and training records. The program was terminated in 1995. An independent CIA review concluded that remote viewing was too vague and too unreliable to provide actionable intelligence. Over its 23-year run, the program cost approximately $20 million. Even within the remote viewing community, the 1988 Ark session has been met with skepticism. Joe McMoneagle, a retired Army Chief Warrant Officer known as Remote Viewer Number 1, dismissed the session as bogus. As McMoneagle put it, if someone claims remote viewing proves the existence of the Ark of the Covenant, they must produce the Ark to substantiate the claim. An Ark that even governments failed to find. So, where has humanity been looking all this time? The global hunt. The most institutionally embedded claim comes from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. A long-standing religious legend describes how the Ark was brought to Ethiopia 3,000 years ago by Menelik, the son of the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. The Ark is said to have been kept ever since in a chapel adjacent to the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in the ancient city of Axum. The chapel has a single guardian monk, the only person allowed to enter it. Chosen for life and replaced at death, the guardian never leaves the chapel grounds. Even the patriarch of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is forbidden from seeing it. Skepticism remains strong. Professor Edward Uhlendorf, a scholar at the University of London, claimed he saw the chapel's Ark during World War II, and that it was merely a wooden box, a replica. According to Uhlendorf, it didn't differ in any way from many arks he had seen in other churches in Ethiopia. In southwestern France, perched high in the Pyrenees, stands the Château de Montségur. This fortress was the last stronghold of the Cathars, a medieval Christian sect. In 1244, more than 200 Cathars were burned alive at Montségur for refusing to renounce their faith. A persistent legend claims the Ark was once hidden in this remote fortress. In 1936, the legend caught the attention of Heinrich Himmler, the second most powerful man in Nazi Germany. During the occupation of France, Nazi brigades were dispatched throughout the Pyrenees to search for the Ark, but they never found it. Then there is the Lemba people of Zimbabwe, black Africans who claim Jewish ancestry and possess a wooden object known as the Ngoma Lungundu, which translates to the drum that thunders or the voice of God. The Ngoma Lungundu was rediscovered in a storeroom in Harare by Professor Tudor Parfitt of the University of London. Parfitt radiocarbon dated it to be 600 years old and noted that its design matches the biblical description in key details: acacia wood, remnants of wooden rings, and a shape consistent with the Ark. The Lemba and Jews share many cultural similarities: male circumcision, dietary laws, and the Star of David on tombstones. Today, the Ngoma Lungundu is on display at the Museum of Human Science in Harare. In March 2026, a startling new theory emerged, placing the Ark in the jungles of the Solomon Islands. Among the Toabaida people on Malaita Island, a deeply rooted belief holds that they descend from the lost 10 tribes of Israel. At the heart of the claim is an extraordinary tradition. Ancient travelers carried the Ark across the Pacific by canoe on an approximate 8,000-mile journey some 2 millennia ago. A local religious movement, the All People's Prayer Assembly, teaches that the Ark remains hidden somewhere on the island. Most historians and archaeologists doubt the Ark could have traversed the Pacific, and no physical evidence links Malaita to an ancient Israelite presence. But while some search for the Ark through psychic visions, mountain caves, and African shrines, others turn to a very different tool. Instead of searching physical locations, they began searching the ancient texts themselves. What if we've been searching in the wrong places altogether because we've been reading the wrong accounts? The AI revelation. For more than 2,000 years, the traditional Jewish and Christian understanding held that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These books contain the foundational stories of creation, the flood, the exodus from Egypt, the giving of the law on Mount Sinai, and the instructions for building the Ark of the Covenant. If Moses wrote them, as Exodus chapter 24, verse 4, states, the Ark narrative came directly from the hand of the prophet who stood before God on the mountain. But in May 2026, a study published by an international team of researchers using artificial intelligence challenged this tradition. The research team, led by mathematician Shira Feigenbaum-Golovin of Duke University, brought together mathematicians, archaeologists, linguists, and computer scientists. Their goal was to apply modern data science to one of the oldest questions in biblical scholarship: who actually wrote the Bible? The team analyzed the first 9 books of the Hebrew Bible, combining linguistic analysis with a custom-developed AI model. The AI examined patterns in word usage, frequency, phrases, and sentence structures. These subtle fingerprints are invisible to the human eye, but emerge clearly when statistical models process thousands of lines of ancient text. In the end, the AI identified 3 distinct writing styles, each with distinct vocabulary, tone, and focus areas, suggesting that multiple authors and sources contributed to the books over time. The algorithm's findings aligned with academic judgment in 84% of cases. Although many chapters fit into one of the 3 identified categories, the team encountered a striking exception. The Ark narrative in Samuel did not match any of the identified styles. If the Ark story in Samuel was written by an author distinct from the priestly and Deuteronomistic sources, then the narrative of the Ark's power, its capture by the Philistines, and its return to Israel may represent a separate tradition, one later woven into the larger biblical tapestry. What does this mean for the search? If multiple authors wrote the Ark story over multiple centuries, then the biblical account may be a composite, a blending of different traditions, different memories, and perhaps different arcs. The story we have inherited may not be a single unified historical record, but a patchwork of competing narratives stitched together over time. And if multiple hands shape the Ark's description, then the object we are searching for may have been understood differently by different communities. Other researchers using different AI tools arrived at complementary findings. Researchers from the University of Groningen developed an AI tool named Enoch to analyze the Dead Sea Scrolls. Using Enoch, they determined the ages of the documents and found some might be older than previously thought. Instead of only a few scrolls dated to the 3rd century BCE, there are now more from this period, plus 1 or 2 dating to the late 4th century BCE. In some cases, the dates are 50 to a century older than previously assumed. The project began in 2010, when Feigenbaum-Golovin analyzed handwriting on pottery fragments dated to around 600 BCE. The findings offered valuable clues for dating Old Testament texts, leading to the formation of a multidisciplinary team that merged mathematical analysis with biblical scholarship. The question is no longer simply who wrote the Ark story, but what it means that multiple people wrote the story over multiple centuries. So, what can we actually verify historically? Where is the evidence that any of this, the Exodus, the Ark, the journey through the wilderness, actually happened? The historical reality. In August 2025, archaeologists at Tel Shiloh in the hill country of Ephraim announced a discovery. Dr. Scott Stripling, director of the excavations, identified the ruins of a monumental stone structure matching the dimensions and layout of the tabernacle, the portable sanctuary that, according to Exodus, housed the Ark. Stripling described a monumental Iron Age I building that matches the biblical descriptions of the tabernacle, oriented east to west, and divided in a 2-to-1 ratio as described in Scripture. Inside, researchers documented a large internal wall separating the space into 2 sections, mirroring the division between the holy place and the Holy of Holies. Around the structure, the team unearthed more than 100,000 animal bones, primarily from sheep, goats, and cattle, with a remarkably high proportion from the right side. Stripling told the Christian Broadcasting Network that these findings cannot be considered a coincidence, and that the evidence for ritual sacrifices is overwhelming and in absolute agreement with the Bible. The right side preference aligns with Leviticus chapter 7, which reserved the right side for priestly offerings. Pottery from the same layers dated to the period when the tabernacle was used, nearly 4 centuries before the Jerusalem temple was built. Shiloh is described in 1 Samuel as Israel's first major religious center, where the high priest Eli presided over the tabernacle. During a war with the Philistines, the Israelites carried the ark from Shiloh to the battlefield, lost the battle, and the ark was captured. The Shiloh discovery does not prove the ark existed, but it proves that a structure matching the biblical description of the tabernacle stood at Shiloh during the period when the Bible says it was there. In May 2025, archaeologists at the Givati parking lot excavation in the city of David unearthed a small gold ring adorned with a red gemstone. The ring dates to approximately 2,300 years ago, the early Hellenistic period. It was found steps away from the Temple of Jerusalem, the last place the Ark is believed to have been located. So, what can archaeology confirm about the Exodus and the Ark? Excavations in the Nile Delta have revealed a large Semitic population from approximately 1650 to 1525 BCE. Bureaucratic records from Egypt confirm brickmaking by Semitic corvée labor. The biblical account of a Semitic population in Egypt, subjected to forced labor, is consistent with the archaeological record. All this evidence reassures that the world the Ark came from actually existed. Still, there is no precise proof of the Ark itself. Scholars have even raised the possibility that more than one Ark may have existed, built at different times or used simultaneously, leaving open the question of which, if any, was the original. Archaeologists do not expect to find the Ark. This is not because they believe it does not exist, but because the conditions for its preservation, if it were hidden deliberately, would make discovery extraordinarily unlikely. The enduring mystery. The Dome of the Rock stands at the center of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It was built in the late 7th century. Inside is the foundation stone. For Jews, this is the holiest site on earth, where the Holy of Holies of the first temple once stood, and where the Ark was said to rest. For Muslims, it is the noble rock from which Muhammad ascended to heaven. For Christians, it is the site of Abraham's sacrifice. The compound is Islam's 3rd holiest site and Judaism's holiest place. It has been called the most contested piece of real estate on earth. In May 2026, Israeli archaeologists presented the first tiny artifacts unearthed in situ on the Temple Mount, conclusively dated to the time of the first temple over 2,600 years ago. The discoveries, made during limited scientific excavations conducted atop the Flashpoint site over the past decade, include olive pits, animal bones, and pottery fragments dating to the 8th to 6th centuries BCE. The excavations were carried out in rare cooperation with the Islamic Waqf, which manages the holy site. In January 2026, carbon dating confirmed that oak beams on the Temple Mount, timbers that once stood in Solomon's temple, are 2,860 years old, cut down around 880 BCE during the early First Temple period. One cypress beam dates to 630 BCE, just 50 years before Nebuchadnezzar raised the temple. These beams now lie exposed to the elements, covered only by a tattered blue tarp and surrounded by garbage. In February 2026, the 2,000-year-old pilgrimage road leading from the city of David to the Western Wall opened to the public after 2 decades of excavation. The 600-meter route was discovered more than 20 years ago by the Israel Antiquities Authority. Excavators found hundreds of artifacts, including cooking pots, oil lamps, bronze coins from the Great Revolt, and a Roman legionnaire's sword. The road was the main thoroughfare through which pilgrims ascended to the temple from the south. Then, on May 2026, archaeologists at the city of David unearthed a monumental moat measuring about 30 feet deep and nearly 100 feet wide, with perpendicular cliffs on each side. The moat, built more than 3,000 years ago, separated the southern residential region from the upper city in the north. The discovery confirms the biblical description of Jerusalem being split into 2 parts, as mentioned in the books of Kings and the books of Samuel. Days later, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir forced his way into the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound to mark the anniversary of Israel's occupation of East Jerusalem. Footage showed Ben-Gvir raising the Israeli flag and dancing in front of the Dome of the Rock. An official from the Islamic Waqf reported that 620 Israeli occupiers stormed the mosque compound under police protection. The Arab League condemned the raid, warning against what it called a Jerusalem Judaization plan. Saudi Arabia condemned the provocative practices and called on the international community to halt violations of Islamic holy sites. The Palestinian Authority condemned the visit as a provocation. Jordan also condemned Ben-Gvir's actions. In June 2026, UNESCO passed a resolution submitted by Algeria, Egypt, Lebanon, Morocco, Oman, Qatar, and Sudan that critics said ignored Jewish ties to the Temple Mount. The United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, the Netherlands, Lithuania, and Estonia voted against. Israel suspended cooperation with UNESCO over the decision. The Ark vanished 2,500 years ago, but the ground beneath which it may still lie has become the most contested piece of territory on Earth. A muon detector can peer beneath the stones without disturbing them. AI can analyze ancient texts without touching a single scroll, but no technology can resolve the question that has haunted this search from the very beginning. If the Ark is ever found, will the world be ready for what it reveals? Or will the object that once united a people become the flashpoint that tears them apart? Thanks for watching. Now, check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.